The lights of the America's Got Talent stage were brighter than anything Rafael Cruz had ever known. They weren't just lights, they were a wall of white heat, pressing against his eyes, warming his face, making it impossible to see the audience clearly. All he could make out were shadows, thousands of them, layered together like waves waiting to crash. Rafael took one step forward, then another. Each step echoed louder than it should have, or maybe it only felt that way because his heart was pounding so hard, he thought the microphones might catch it. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, while washing dishes late at night, while riding the bus after 12-hour shifts, while staring at the ceiling of a tiny rented room in California that smelled faintly of detergent and loneliness. In every version, he told himself he wouldn't be afraid, but fear had followed him here anyway. He adjusted the collar of his jacket, white, just like Elvis used to wear, though his was not custom-made or sparkling. It was borrowed, slightly too big. The sleeves hung past his wrists, covering hands that had known more work than applause. As Rafael reached the center of the stage, a few quiet chuckles drifted through the room. Not loud, not cruel, but enough to remind him that people were already making decisions about him before he had opened his mouth. A man in his late 40s, short, Filipino, soft-spoken, standing beneath a giant AGT logo, dressed like a dream that didn't quite fit. One of the judges smiled politely, the kind of smile meant to be encouraging, but distant. Another leaned back in their chair, arms crossed, eyes curious but cautious. Someone in the audience whispered something, and a ripple of laughter followed. Rafael heard it all. He felt his throat tighten. For just a moment, the old doubt rose inside him, the same doubt that had followed him since childhood, the voice that used to whisper, "You are too small." Too different, too late, but then another voice spoke louder, his father's. Rafael exhaled slowly and leaned toward the microphone. "Good evening," he said, his accent gentle, his voice steady despite the storm inside his chest. "My name is Rafael Cruz." The host smiled. "And where are you from, Rafael?" "I am from the Philippines," he replied, "but now I live in the United States." A judge nodded. "And what will you be doing for us tonight?" Rafael paused. "Just long enough to feel the weight of the moment settle. I will sing," he said. Another pause. Elvis Presley. This time the laughter was louder, not mocking, more surprised, amused, curious. Rafael didn't blame them. He had seen the viral clips too, the novelty acts, the jokes, the costumes that promised more spectacle than soul. He knew how this looked. A middle-aged Filipino man standing on the biggest talent stage in America, daring to touch a legend. One judge raised an eyebrow. "Elvis is a big choice," they said. "Why him?" Rafael smiled, not nervously but warmly, as if the question had opened a door he'd been waiting to walk through. "Because Elvis was the first singer I ever loved," he said. "Before I knew English, before I knew America, before I knew dreams." The room quieted just a little. Rafael continued, "When I was a boy, my father worked at the docks. Long hours, heavy work. Sometimes he came home so tired he could barely sit, but every night—" Rafael swallowed. "Every night he played Elvis." He gestured gently, as if holding something fragile in the air. A small cassette player, old. The sound was not very good, but my father sang with it, loud, happy, like pain was not allowed in the room. The judges leaned in now. Rafael's hands trembled, but he didn't hide them. "My father said Elvis helped him feel strong, helped him feel seen, even when life was very hard. A beat, he passed that love to me." The laughter was gone completely. Rafael felt the shift, not just in the audience but inside himself. The fear loosened its grip, replaced by something steadier, something braver. He looked up toward the lights. "I am not here to be funny," he said softly. "And I am not here to be famous." He paused. "I am here because my father taught me that music can carry love across oceans." Silence filled the theater, the kind of silence that listens. Rafael closed his eyes for just a second. In that darkness he saw his childhood home, the cracked concrete floor, the open window letting in sea air, his father, younger, healthier, tapping his foot to an Elvis song while stirring rice on the stove. Rafael opened his eyes again. "I hope tonight," he said, voice steady, "you will listen with your hearts." The host nodded slowly. "Whenever you're ready." The band prepared. The first soft notes hovered in the air, waiting. Rafael took a deep breath. The stage lights no longer felt blinding. They felt like home. And as the music began, no one in that room could have guessed that the man they nearly laughed at was about to remind them all of something they had forgotten, that sometimes the quietest souls carry the loudest love. The music had not started yet. The band waited. The judges waited. The audience waited. Rafael stood perfectly still at center stage, the microphone resting lightly in his hands. For a moment it seemed as though he was listening to something only he could hear, like a distant echo traveling across time and ocean. Then he spoke again. "Before I sing," Rafael said gently, "may I tell you something?" The host glanced toward the judges. One nodded immediately. "Of course." The host said, "Take your time." Rafael exhaled, relief softening his shoulders. He had carried this story for years, but tonight under these lights it felt heavier, and more important, than ever before. "I grew up in a very small town," he began, his voice calm but layered with memory. "Near the sea. We did not have much. My father worked wherever there was work, fishing, loading cargo, cleaning boats." He smiled faintly. "Sometimes he came home with hands so rough they looked like they belonged to another man." The audience listened closely now. Rafael shifted his weight slightly, grounding himself. "In our home, there was one thing that never changed," he said. "Every evening when the sun went down, my father played music. He lifted an invisible cassette player with his hands, careful, reverent. It was old, scratched. Sometimes the tape would stop, and he had to hit it just right to make it work again." A soft laugh rolled through the crowd. "But when Elvis sang," Rafael continued, "my father smiled like the world was kind." Rafael's voice warmed as he spoke, as if each word unlocked another memory. "I didn't understand the lyrics at first. I was just a child, but I understood how it made him feel, strong, free, proud." One judge leaned forward, elbows on the desk. Rafael's eyes glistened. "My father used to say, 'Son, one day you will go far, and when you feel tired, sing.'" Rafael paused. "Years later, I understood what he meant." He told them about leaving the Philippines, how it wasn't a dramatic decision, but a painful one. How he hugged his father at the airport, both of them pretending not to cry. How his mother slipped a small cross into his pocket and told him to call every Sunday. "When I came to America," Rafael said, "I worked as a caregiver." The word hung in the air. "I cared for elderly people. Some could not walk. Some could not remember their own names. Many were alone." The audience shifted, recognizing something deeply human in that truth. "At night," Rafael said, "after my shift, I went home to a small room, very quiet, very lonely." He swallowed. "That is when I played Elvis." His hands tightened around the microphone. "Sometimes I sang softly so my neighbors would not complain. Sometimes I sang loud because I needed to feel my father close." Rafael looked toward the judges. "Music became my bridge between countries, between past and present, between who I was and who I was trying to become." The room felt intimate now, as if the theater had shrunk to fit the story. Rafael hesitated. There was more. "My father became sick," he said, "very sick." A hush fell over the audience. "I could not always be there. I sent money. I sent messages. I sent songs." His voice trembled for the first time. "The last time we spoke, he asked me to sing for him over the phone. The connection was bad. The sound kept breaking." Rafael smiled sadly, but he listened anyway. A tear slid down his cheek. He did not wipe it away. He said, "Son, even broken sound can carry love." The judges were no longer taking notes. They were simply listening. Rafael inhaled slowly. "My father passed away 1 year ago." The words landed softly, but their weight was immense. "I could not attend his funeral," Rafael said. "I was working, I was saving, I was surviving." The audience felt the quiet ache of that sacrifice. "So tonight," Rafael said, lifting his head, "this song is for him." He straightened his jacket. "And for every person who feels small, or far from home, or unseen. Rafael looked out into the darkness beyond the lights. "This is not just an Elvis song," he said. "It is a thank you." The band leader glanced at the host. The host nodded. Rafael closed his eyes again. In his mind he saw his father, sitting on a wooden chair, smiling, tapping his foot, waiting. The music cue began softly, and in that moment, before a single note was sung, everyone in the room already knew this was no joke. This was no gimmick. This was a son about to sing his way home. The first note did not explode. It floated, soft, steady, almost fragile, like a breath released after holding too much inside for too long. Rafael opened his eyes as he sang, not to look at the judges or the crowd, but as if he were looking through them, towards something far beyond the stage. His voice carried a warmth that surprised even him, deep, controlled, and filled with a quiet confidence that did not demand attention, yet held it completely. At first, some people in the audience shifted in their seats. They had expected an impression, a novelty, a costume act. What they heard instead was sincerity. Rafael didn't mimic Elvis. He honored him. He let the melody breathe, letting every word land naturally, as if he were telling a story rather than performing a song. His accent did not disappear, it belonged. It wrapped the lyrics in something human, something earned. By the second line, a judge's smile faded into stillness. By the first chorus, no one was laughing. The theater, once restless, had settled into a rare collective silence. Rafael's hands relaxed at his sides, his shoulders dropped. The nerves that had followed him onto the stage began to loosen, replaced by something else entirely. Presence, as he sang, his mind traveled backward. He was no longer beneath the AGT lights. He was 8 years old again, sitting on the cool cement floor of his childhood home. His father was nearby, humming along, eyes closed, tapping his fingers against the table in perfect time. The walls were thin, the neighbors could hear everything, but no one complained, because music made even poverty feel lighter. Rafael's voice grew stronger, not louder, stronger. Each phrase carried the weight of years spent working quietly, loving deeply, and waiting patiently for a moment that might never come. His voice held gratitude, it held grief, it held resilience. Halfway through the song, something unexpected happened. His voice cracked, not dramatically, not enough to break the song, but enough to reveal the truth beneath it. For a split second, Rafael panicked. "I lost it," he thought. Then he felt it. The crack wasn't weakness. It was memory. The audience leaned forward, drawn in by the vulnerability that could never be rehearsed. A woman in the front row raised her hand to her mouth. A man beside her wiped his eyes quickly, hoping no one noticed. On the judges' panel, one judge's pen slipped from their fingers and hit the desk with a soft tap. No one flinched, no one looked away. Rafael kept singing. The band followed him gently, adjusting to the emotion rather than overpowering it. The arrangement felt less like accompaniment and more like support, like hands at his back, holding him steady. As the second chorus swelled, Rafael lifted his chin slightly. He wasn't singing for the room anymore. He was singing with it. Every note carried intention, every pause mattered. He let silence speak where words could not. He let the song breathe, just as his father had taught him, by feeling, not forcing. Then came the bridge, the hardest part. Rafael closed his eyes again. This time tears slipped free. They rolled down his cheeks, unchecked, catching the light as they fell. He didn't try to hide them. He didn't wipe them away. He sang through them. The sound of his voice, trembling yet steady, wrapped itself around the room like a shared confession. In that moment, the audience wasn't watching a contestant. They were witnessing a son, a caregiver, an immigrant, a man who had carried love across oceans and placed it gently into a song. The final chorus approached. Rafael drew a breath, slow, deliberate. He remembered the last phone call with his father. The broken connection, the fading voice, the words spoken between static and silence. Sing to heal. He poured everything into that final section. Not power, but purpose. The last note stretched, clear, aching, honest, before fading into the quiet. The music stopped. Rafael lowered the microphone for a heartbeat. Nothing happened, no applause, no cheers, just silence. But this silence was different from before. It was heavy, sacred, the kind of silence that follows something important. Rafael opened his eyes. The judges were frozen. One sat with their hand over their mouth. Another stared at him, as if seeing him for the first time. A third blinked rapidly, clearly fighting emotion. Then, slowly, someone stood, then another. The applause began not as an explosion but as a wave, rising, growing, filling the space with warmth and awe. Rafael bowed his head, overwhelmed. He hadn't planned for this. He had only planned to sing. As the audience rose to their feet, Rafael felt something release inside him, a weight he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. For the first time in a long time, he felt seen. And somewhere beyond the lights, beyond the sound, beyond the applause, a father was smiling. The applause did not fade quickly. It rolled through the theater like thunder that refused to settle, echoing off the walls, rising higher, louder, as if the room itself needed time to release everything it had been holding in. Rafael stood at center stage, frozen. His hands shook, not from fear this time, but from disbelief. The sound was overwhelming, the clapping, the cheers, the standing ovation that surrounded him from every direction. For a moment, he didn't know where to look. He bowed his head instinctively, as though trying to disappear into the gratitude swelling inside his chest. He had come prepared for judgment, maybe rejection, maybe polite applause. He had not prepared for this. One judge rose to their feet first, then another, then all of them. The audience followed, the entire theater standing as one, applause pounding like a heartbeat shared by thousands. The host stepped forward gently, placing a hand on Rafael's shoulder. "Take your time," they whispered. Rafael nodded, breathing deeply, trying to steady himself. His chest felt tight, not with panic, but with emotion pressing outward, demanding to be felt. One of the judges spoke first. "I don't even know where to begin," they said, their voice uncharacteristically quiet. "We see a lot of performances on this stage, big voices, big personalities, but what you just did..." They paused, searching for words. "That was truth." Rafael looked up. The judge continued, "When you walked out here, I'll be honest, I thought this might be a joke." A soft murmur moved through the audience, but the moment you opened your mouth, the judge said, pointing gently toward Rafael, "The room changed. You didn't perform at us. You invited us into your life." Another judge leaned forward, eyes glistening. "I lost my father too," they said quietly. "And when you sang, I wasn't listening as a judge, I was listening as a child." The room grew still again. "That," the judge added, "is something you cannot fake." Rafael swallowed hard. Tears welled in his eyes once more. A third judge spoke, their voice thick with emotion. "You know what moved me the most?" they asked. "It wasn't just your voice, it was your humility, your kindness, the way you honored your father, not with perfection, but with love." They smiled at Rafael. This stage has seen talent, but tonight it saw humanity. Rafael brought a trembling hand to his mouth, overwhelmed. The host handed him the microphone again. "Rafael," they said gently, "how are you feeling right now?" Rafael took a moment before speaking. "I feel," he paused, searching, "I feel like my father is here." A ripple of emotion moved through the crowd. "When I was young," Rafael continued, "my father told me that even if no one is listening, sing anyway, because someone somewhere might need it." He looked toward the judges. "Tonight," he said, "you listened." His voice broke. "Thank you." The audience erupted again, louder than before. Then came the moment no one expected. One judge stood up again and walked toward the stage. "Rafael," they said, "may I ask you something?" "Yes," Rafael replied, nodding. "If your father were standing right here, what would you say to him?" Rafael froze. The question struck deep. For a long moment he couldn't speak. The lights dimmed slightly, the room quiet once more, as if the entire audience understood the weight of what was being asked. Rafael closed his eyes. He imagined his father, not sick, not tired, but strong. Smiling, arms crossed, listening. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I would say, thank you for teaching me how to love." A collective breath left the room, and I would tell him, Rafael continued, that I finally sang without being afraid. Tears flowed freely now. from the judges, from the audience, from Rafael himself. The judge nodded slowly, wiping their eyes. "You honored him tonight," they said, in the most beautiful way. The final vote came quickly. Yes, 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 of 4 simple words, 4 open doors. The crowd exploded. Rafael stood in shock as confetti fell softly around him, catching in his hair, landing on his jacket like small blessings. He reached out, touching one piece, as if to make sure this moment was real. The host raised Rafael's hand. "America," they announced, "this is Rafael Cruz." The cheers were deafening, but amid the noise, Rafael felt something quiet settle inside him. Peace. He looked upward, not at the lights, but beyond them. "I hope," he whispered to himself, "you heard that, Papa." And somewhere beyond the stage, beyond the applause, beyond the moment, a lesson lingered in the air. That kindness carries farther than talent, that humility speaks louder than confidence, and that when we sing from love, the world listens. The stage lights eventually dimmed, the applause softened, and the crowd slowly began to leave. But something remained. It lingered in the air, invisible yet undeniable. Rafael stood alone near the edge of the stage long after the cameras stopped rolling. The confetti had been swept away, the judges had left their chairs. The noise that once filled the theater had faded into memory, yet his heart was still racing. A production assistant gently tapped his shoulder. "You did great," they said, smiling before moving on. Rafael nodded politely, but words felt unnecessary. He pressed his hand against his chest, grounding himself, reminding himself that this moment, this impossible moment, had truly happened. For years his life had been quiet. Wake up, work, care for others. Sing softly when no one was listening. Tonight the world had listened. Backstage, Rafael sat alone on a folding chair, his white jacket folded neatly beside him. He stared at his hands, hands that had bathed strangers, fed them, held them steady in their final moments. Hands that had never expected applause. A young contestant passed by and paused. "Sir," she said hesitantly, "I just wanted to say, when you sang I called my dad." Rafael looked up. She smiled through tears. "Thank you for reminding me." She walked away before he could respond. Rafael closed his eyes. This, he realized, was why his father had loved music so much. Because it didn't belong to one person. It belonged to everyone who needed it. That night, Rafael returned to his small room, the same one he had left hours earlier, unchanged and unremarkable. The walls were thin. The window still faced a dark street. The silence was familiar. But Rafael was not the same man who had left. He placed his phone on the table and saw the missed calls, messages, notifications lighting up the screen like stars, relatives from the Philippines, old friends, co-workers he barely spoke to, even one message from a former patient's family. "We saw you," it read, "thank you." Rafael sat down slowly. He opened the window and let the night air in. For the first time since his father's passing, he played Elvis without sadness. He sang, not loudly, not carefully, but freely. Days later, the performance spread, across screens, across states, across oceans. People shared the video with captions like, "This healed me. I didn't expect to cry today. My dad loved Elvis too." In hospitals, nurses played the clip during late night shifts. In small apartments, immigrants watched it alone, feeling a little less far from home. In living rooms across America, families sat quietly together, remembering. Rafael received letters, real ones, handwritten notes from strangers who felt seen by his story. One read, "I've been afraid to sing since my husband passed. You gave me courage." Another said, "I work 2 jobs too. Thank you for reminding me why I started." Rafael kept every letter. He returned to his caregiving job the following week. Nothing about the work had changed, except him. He sang while cooking meals, while cleaning rooms, while holding hands. Patients smiled more. Some asked him to sing again, and when they did, Rafael never said no. One afternoon, he visited the ocean. He stood barefoot in the sand, phone in hand, and played the same Elvis song his father used to love. The waves moved in gentle rhythm, like a quiet audience. Rafael spoke aloud, his voice steady. "I sang, Papa," he said, and they listened. The wind carried his words away. He smiled, because he finally understood something his father had known all along, that greatness is not measured by stages or screens. It is measured by how deeply we touch another heart. Rafael didn't win the competition that season, but it didn't matter. He had already won something far more lasting. He had turned pain into purpose, silence into song, loss into love, and somewhere in countless homes across the world, people pressed play again, just to feel that kindness one more time. Closing narration message optional for voiceover. Sometimes the most powerful voices are not the loudest, but the kindest. And when we sing from love, even the world's biggest stage becomes a place of healing.